I'm doing my job and I'm being respectful and I'm responding politely, even in the cases where that person maybe is being more confrontational. And I have gotten feedback after those cases from people that the way you handled that was really professional and the way that guy was acting was not.
I'll have what she's having.
Welcome to another edition of
She talks confidence.
Podcast.
This is Tony. This is the She Talks Confidence podcast. And today I have, and I can't wait to dive into this because it deals with a woman in a male-dominated field and someone that is deeply ingrained into the STEM, which I think is incredibly important for women in the science and technology and math. She's an engineer, one of the head honchos there at
Yeah.
LSW Engineering in Phoenix. Sam Rabinovitz. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing good today.
Good. Can you go over how did you get into that and where did the confidence come in and where was that important? Being a woman in this type of field and being in math and science, and then, how it helped you continue to move on until now you're one of the top engineers in your field.
My degree that I graduated with was actually architectural engineering, which is a degree program that focused on the building industry.
Mhm.
So you have an electrical, mechanical, or structural track you can do within that. And so how I got into that is actually my father. I thought I wanted to be an architect growing up, and he's an electrical engineer. And he was always talking about how math and science were very strong fields for me. And with that, I should focus on engineering. And so he really pushed getting into, which I think is really cool because for me, that was normal. But then talking to some of my peers in college, they had stories about how their dad discouraged them from going into engineering because it was a male field.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yes. So I, looking back now, realized like the first person who really helped support me getting into this was my father.
Mhm.
Just because he didn't treat it as anything out of the normal for a girl to go into.
He didn't point out that there's any difference. It's just if you want to do that, then do that.
Yeah. He was like, this is where you can be successful based off what I know. That was really great. And then for the confidence side of things, I don't feel like that really came about until I was a year or two into my career. Going through college, I was always studying off by myself, but didn't really get involved or speak up in the classes. It really took getting into my career. I think the key spot where it flipped for me was getting to a point where I realized that knowing that I did a good job and that I could be happy with myself at the end of the day was more important than what other people thought. Because in the beginning, I definitely held off on speaking up or taking lead on something because I was worried about doing it wrong or having somebody think poorly of me for speaking up.
In your first couple of years when you're trying to just feel for things, did you see the men, the guys that were at your same level, your associate level, did you see them out there speaking up? And then how did you feel when they did that versus you finally coming to the point where you're like, I can do that too?
Definitely a little bit more so they were speaking up or taking lead on something than I was, but not a lot because they were still new in their career and learning a lot too. So usually there was a more senior person on the team that was doing that role.
What clicked in you that you finally said,
Yeah.
hold on a minute, I can do this and I have level of, because the issue with confidence, especially with women, and I'll just throw this in, and agree or disagree with me on this, is that it's this perceived level of competence in something where you don't have the experience yet to be competent in something, and yet you think that, oh, I'm a fraud or I'm an imposter if I feel confident in something I'm not competent in. Whereas real true confidence doesn't have anything to do with competence. It just has to do with being confident in who you are and knowing that you are going the right direction, you are committing to it, and you do have the ability to get to that point. And I'm just curious, when all this went through your head, what finally clicked to where you accepted that?
I definitely agree with you about that's a key thing that was holding me back too. So I'd say there were two things that kind of led to that. The first one is I have a really great boss, and he's always been a great advocate and very supportive. And so we hit a point where he was like, "You're ready. You know what you're doing. I'm not coming to meetings anymore.
Hmm.
You have to take charge of this." And I was like, "Whoa, I'm not ready for that." And he's like, "Yes, you are.
Throwing
Just
you
go
the
do it."
deep end, so to speak, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, just
I think that was a big deal for me getting past that point, because if he had a different attitude, that would have been very different.
yeah.
And then the second one is I think I hit a point where I was getting frustrated with things not getting done or not getting done the right way. And so it finally got to a point where I was like, okay, if I want this to happen, I have to step up. And
Hmm.
for that was when it was like, okay, I just clicked and I started taking lead or speaking up or being an owner of something. And then I realized, okay, that went really well. Why was I so worried about failing or people not liking the way I handled that?
Hmm.
Because again, at the end of the day, what they think doesn't matter as long as I'm happy with myself and I know I did my best.
Right, exactly. And at the same time, still being a team player, right? Because that's important.
Exactly.
And then, what
Yeah.
did you have any women on your team? And is it a different relationship with women engineers than it is with men engineers?
A little bit. I do have some women on my team, and I've mentored a number of women over the years too, who've gone on to step into their own leadership roles in our company or moving on to roles in other companies. And I'd like to think that I treat everybody the same way, but I do try to help build them up and help them get to that point sooner, because I know that was a really tough thing for me to figure out in my career, was that point where I needed to step into a leadership role and take that on in a project, or else it was going to set my career back,
Hmm.
and helping them know that they can do that too.
Did you
Yeah.
have a woman mentor when you got into the field?
No, I didn't.
How important
Yeah.
is that? And what have you found as a mentor yourself that was not there for you? And you know how important that is to have somebody
Yeah.
like that. The women coming into that particular industry, what do you find is the biggest issue that they face? And how are you helping them through that?
Yeah. I think the not having that person within our company myself, again, luckily my boss was really great, really supportive, and very helpful to me as a mentor. But I have over time developed a network of other women in similar roles in the industry that we get together for breakfast or for lunch, and I can talk to them about challenges that maybe the men in this industry don't understand. And so
Hmm.
that having that network has really helped fill that gap for me. So for other women coming into our company, I try to encourage them to go network and build their own network of peers that they can reach out to for those people. Because even though we do have a lot of women in our office now,
Hmm.
sometimes there's things that you just need an outside source to talk to. And
Oh, for sure.
having a woman or a peer in the same industry, even if they're not in engineering, but maybe they're a contractor or an architect, still gives you a different perspective on even how things are done at their company, or something we're not doing that we could add in that is more beneficial for people going forward too.
Exactly. You talked about specific challenges that women face in your field versus the men. What are some of those like specific unique challenges that women face?
Yeah. I, definitely the confidence thing in getting to where you can speak up more in meetings, take lead, explain your work to a client is a big one. Things have gotten a lot better, but there is still some of that bias of you're a woman in construction, and from time to time you'll run into somebody who has that, and knowing how to deal with it the first
Hmm.
time you run across it. Coming in, I didn't have that for a while, and then I worked on a project where there was somebody who had that attitude, and not knowing how to deal with it that first time it happened. So having more resources or coaching for newer people coming in And it should continue to be less and less over time that you run into that. I would say now the only time I run into anything like that is if I go out to a construction site.
I was gonna say it's got to be construction.
Yeah, it's
That's
on the
the good
construction
old boy
site.
club. Yeah.
Yeah, but as soon as they know that I know how to fix their problem, or I'm the only person who can sign the drawing they need to
Ah,
get through, then
gotta love
then
leverage,
things
right? Yeah.
the level of respect changes at that point. Yeah,
Which it's sad that has to be the case, right? That it's because they need something from you that they change instead of just having a level of inherent respect because you are seasoned
yeah,
professional in your field. How do you handle the good old boy male
yeah.
attitude if that comes across that way? A lot of times, because this is a big question that I get from my women clients is, how do I handle when some guy comes in and is just a total misogynist? And because there are a lot out there still, and how do I stand my ground without coming across as a bitch or coming across as weak? How do I do that?
And I don't run into that very often, but usually what I do is I make sure that I am prepared and that I can answer anything that comes up in that situation. And what I have found is that in those cases, the other people in the room realize that I'm doing my job and I'm being respectful and I'm responding politely, even in the cases where that person maybe is being more confrontational. And I have gotten feedback after those cases from people that the way you handled that was really professional and the way that guy was acting was not. So I know coming out of it, it's really hard to not just respond back to that person like you're being an ass,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but it keeps the respect from everyone else in the room in my favor versus that other person. And over time, I found that means that I can be treated differently by those people.
That's a huge concept shift from looking at it from the perspective of standing your ground and knowing that you deserve, because you do, you deserve a higher
Yeah.
level of respect for all of that you've done and what your position is. And it's not like you're going to change their mind or anything. That's just how they are. That's such a great perspective shift. I think it's very important to see it from
Yeah.
that perspective because the feedback that I get from a lot of my women clients is that I want to stand up for myself and this person makes me feel terrible or they're minimizing me. You've mentored quite a few women in your time. Do you ever get them coming back to you and asking additional questions a couple years down the line and saying, okay, I'm coming up against a new challenge here. How do I handle that? After you mentor somebody and they go off, what are the other challenges that you see women coming up against as they move forward even more into their career?
I think the one that's come up more frequently is I'm still a younger member on this team. How do I get this person to listen to my idea? Or how do I
Um,
convince the client that this is the right way to do it? And it's the same approach that I've found to be the most successful as what we talked about with in that conversation is
mhm.
present your case with facts and make it clear why this is the best solution. And at the end of the day, you're in the right. And if they don't agree with you, that's on them, but you did your best.
Mhm.
And most of the time, as long as you're doing it in that way, I've seen that it generally gets accepted. Like, okay, yeah, what you're saying makes sense. You're right. I didn't think about that. We should do that. So being able to go through things in that detail and explain them and why we have to do them a certain way.
Mhm.
Get
And then after that, you go home and you go to your kickboxing class, kick the crap out of the bag, right?
yeah, sometimes, yeah,
Or the husband gets an earful because that's what we do. We just either the husband or the wife comes back and then it's just a back and forth emotional dump
yeah,
afterwards in terms of how big of a jerk that person is, which is totally natural. And to be honest with you, I think it's needed. It's a needed venting process. It's
yeah,
just a matter of husband or wife,
yeah.
girlfriend,
And
boyfriend.
I always tell those people, even if they don't work for me anymore, they're welcome to come talk to me or just vent if they need to, because sometimes you just need to do that to
Oh
feel better
yes.
about. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm biased in that perspective because I've worked with women for so long and I understand. And being a girl dad, that's the reason I do this in the first place. is because I saw how different life was for my daughter raising her and seeing the differences and saying, what is this? And it's the only reason I'm here, to be honest, is because I had that experience. And it was such a different experience for me seeing it from a dad's eyes with my daughter in going through this stuff. And that's why I have such respect, especially for women like you that have gone through a male dominated field and have excelled at it and learned the process. I think one of the biggest issues that women come to me with is fighting against the system. I don't believe it's fighting against the system. I think it's more about understanding it more and being able to work with it in the same time, changing it how just exactly how you're changing it by being a mentor now and by setting a good example. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with you. It can be really frustrating coming into something or a company and finding something that you're like, this doesn't work for a woman or this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But what I've found is that finding the right time and opportunity to bring that up and make a change, yeah, it's not going to happen overnight, but we can use our position to like continue to move up in the company and be in a spot where we can influence change or influence that things need to be done differently. That goes a lot better and makes a bigger difference than that initial reaction of this isn't going to work and it causing a conflict, which I know isn't necessarily fair because that's not something that gets resolved immediately. But I have found that as I've moved up, everybody learns more. Like when you come into your career initially, you're like think you need to change everything immediately and everything has to be done
Of course.
at that moment. It's not realistic. It
Uh,
takes time, and there's things I have to have in mind the scenes to work out why something needs to be different or why they need to change a policy and there's a lot of things that impact those that I would have never thought of until now being in a position, knowing more of the reasons behind something or why we can't do something or that there's a legal reason.
mm-hmm.
But it is pretty cool being in a position now where I can help make decisions or influence things that help make things better for all employees, but women in particular, if there's something that doesn't fair.
Oh, I think that's such a great position to be in. You brought up your experience and rising up through the levels and then being able to see different things from a new, more broader perspective and a more rich and deeper perspective. How does
Yeah.
confidence follow you? Because a lot of women think once I get the tools, and I'm using air quotes, of confidence, then everything's great. I don't have to work on it anymore. I know how to switch myself in. And that's not the case. So, what are some of the challenges that you found as you've risen up? And then what you deal with now in terms of remaining grounded in your base of true self and your base of confidence in terms of you being able to meet all the challenges that come up and to excel.
Probably the biggest one is being in the position I am in now. There's always people who don't agree with you on things. And so that it's very easy to let the self-doubt creep in about, did I make the right decision? Did I do something that's going to screw things up for people? And having to work constantly on pushing that voice back out and being like, no, you did the best you could. If something goes wrong, like it's not something you could have foreseen. You went through all the information. You made the best decision that you could at that time. And then knowing too, there's always going to be that person who's not happy with something.
Always, there's always somebody, right? Oh, yeah.
And being able to listen to that person and get the constructive feedback because it's still important for them to be able to voice their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, being able to go home and say, okay, they got their opinion out, but at the end of the day, that's not what we're doing. And I can set that aside and not let it affect my mental state. And I can go home and be happy with myself.
It's such a good point. It's the self-talk because it's easy to get into a downward spiral on self-talk if you get a external reaction that's not in your groove. And I'm coming from a perfectionist background. So from a perfectionist, state. And for somebody who was very linear in their thinking initially, I always took it way more harshly in external feedback than I should have in looking at it from that perspective. But it is so important to understand that even the higher that we get, and I've even dealt with top C suite level executives, and they still have the same doubts that come in. It's that never goes away. And in fact, it could get more intense because the higher we go, the more responsibility that we have, or the more
Right. And
expectations that are
more
put
more
upon. Exactly. So when that happens, it could bury you unless you're grounded in that sense, and you just use what you use, and then you fall back exactly what you had talked about. You fall back into that self talk of reevaluating and regrounding yourself. That is one of the most important tools anybody could
Yep.
have, especially women can have, and especially women in a male dominated field. I think that's such a great little tool and tidbit to understand and to keep with people. I want to wrap this up with STEM. We talked earlier because my son in law, you work with him, and my granddaughter is very same. She's very STEM E. She's great in math. She loves it. She has that sort of perspective on things. How important is it for men and dads and the support group around young girls to encourage that, not push, but encourage? And where do you see the field going from here?
Yeah, I think that it's gotta start at home with the parent, and especially if the dad does it, it's gonna just make it seem natural
Hmm.
for those girls who have that interest. So encouraging them, looking for opportunities to help them explore, is that an interest they have? I'm part of a group that we try to do a volunteer event every year to
Oh,
focus on STEM and getting girls into STEM. And there's a lot of really great programs in Arizona that help put on activities, but the activities do a lot, but only if the parent or the siblings encourage the girls to go attend those.
exactly.
So it's got to
Hmm.
with the family.
That's such a huge component. And so I wouldn't say it was lucky that you had your dad be supportive like that, but man, it really
It was
helped, didn't
definitely a
it?
big foundational deal for
Yeah,
me. 'Cause
that's great. And then in terms of
yeah.
what's yeah, and then in terms of women and engineers, you're
Mhm.
seeing more and more women, thank God, more and more women get in because I think obviously I think from an engineering standpoint, I think they have a lot to give to that field. What are you seeing happening now in that field, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, I definitely see more women coming into the engineering side, the design side, engineering, architecture, which is awesome. It's so great. And continuing to encourage that, there are more women graduating every year in those programs, but it's still not 50-50 for sure. And actually, I'm part of several groups where there's a big focus right now on the contractor side because there's
Hmm.
not a lot of women. The percentages of women in construction roles are very low.
Well,
And so they're trying to help encourage, like, the design side is important too, but there's a lot that you can do in the construction side,
mhm.
engineering background, degree. And so I think over time, the STEM programs are probably going to be expanded further to also focus on like trades roles.
Okay. I think it makes a lot of sense because
Yeah.
the contractors are the ones that are manifesting and creating what is drawn, what's thought about and drawn. And so there has to be a synthesis there, right?
Yes. So I
Uh,
think that'll probably be the last step too in helping. We'll never fully eliminate that bias, but I think there's been a lot of progress made in the architecture side and the engineering side, that the construction side is maybe where most more of
yeah,
that
and
still is.
that might be a long road to hoe.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam Rabinovitz. I really appreciate it. And I will put your contact in the show notes if anybody wants to chat.
I definitely like to help encourage anyone who may need a resource or trying to get into this field.
I love that because there again, it is incredibly important to have a mentor and have somebody to talk to. And especially with women and especially in STEM, I think availability, accessibility is huge. I appreciate that. And for me, it's Tony at theconfidencedoc.com, or you can listen to any of my thousands of podcasts out there or read the book or whatever. You already know the whole story, how it goes. And if you have any questions, you can email me, and this will be available on every platform and the YouTube shorts afterwards. Make sure you watch and click like on those. I appreciate it, and I will talk to you next week.